Hey everybody, welcome to What the Tech. This is the show where myself and the very great and magical Paul Thurrott discuss
And
things
the other
happening in
guy.
technology. The other guy discuss things in technology. We don't necessarily run down the news, but we do cover some things happening in the news. How you doing, Paul?
I'm well. How's your face?
My face is doing bad. Thank you for asking. I had a shaving mishap earlier. I went, and you know, can I?
Still drinking.
Well, you'll laugh more if I tell you the name of this device.
Oh, please. I hope it's some kind of metrosexual awful thing.
The eye stubble.
Nice.
It's called.
Does it use the vibrate function of your iPhone to give you the perfect shave?
I don't know. It's called the eye stubble. I forgot. Like one of the main brands makes it, and I go, you know what? This is the Apple gods coming down on me from last week's show. Because of last week's show. And this was like 30 minutes before the show. I'm like, you know, I could shave before I go on the air. And this thing just shaves off half my face. Because, of course, they don't follow standards. Why would something called the eye stubble follow standards? A number 1 is not equivalent to a number 1. It's equivalent to like a 0. So half my face is shaved off. My wife asked me if I was crying when she came home. And that was
which is like, you know, number 2 on the list of things you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you don't want your wife to ask you. Number 1 being, are you happy?
And it wasn't a oh my God, are you okay? It was a, are you crying? I said, no, I'm not. Just shaved my face off. So
Like that awesome Star Wars robot chicken video where Darth Vader calls after the Death Star got blown up, and the Emperor's like, "Are you crying?" Have you seen this video?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a special they had, right? It was all.
Yeah. I think this is that might even be the first one they ever did.
Yeah. It was awful. I'm so upset, and I was actually so devastated. I thought about maybe not being able to do a show today. That's how bad it was.
You do look like a 12-year-old boy. But
I do. I look. You know what my wife said? She said, with your hair slicked back, you look, and the little sub, you look like a Russian mobster.
Wow.
And I said, thank you.
Coincidentally, number 5 on the list of things you don't want to hear your wife.
So now I've heard Russian mobster, I've heard Groucho Marx, and
Nice.
I've heard a magician.
Oh, jeez.
So this is what
You
I
look a
get.
little bit like a young Steve Jobs.
Yeah, yeah, very much. That's another thing I don't want to hear. It's been a very eventful week once again, and this week on the show we're going to do something different. We're going to talk about future technology devices and the future of computing, because I saw Paul had a great thing on his site on winsupersite.com. You had those videos that Microsoft has released over the last couple of years, I guess from the 90s on, of what the future of computing will be.
There are way more of those, too. I'm hoping people discover other videos like that, because there are a lot of them.
Well, I know the AT&T one, which is infamous at this point, right? Everybody knows the old school AT&T one, the future of
Tom Selleck's voice.
Yeah, which is fascinating, because you know what? A lot of those stuff it exists right now.
Yeah.
And then there was another one. I don't know if it was Apple or if it was somebody. The guy was looking up something for the rainforest, and he was in an office.
This is I think the Dynabook. I got the name wrong, but this is a John Scully video that was meant to show that he was a computer visionary of some kind.
Yeah.
And Dynabook might be the wrong term. I think Dynabook was the name that Alan Kay gave. Knowledge Navigator is the correct term.
That might be it. And he's looking up stuff for the rainforest, and he's doing a conference. It was a whole thing. I remember that one. But all that one was, you know, it was like voice activation and you know, and the computer kept reminding him to wish his mother a happy birthday. And he didn't for some reason. And all I could think of is, I wonder how bad that relationship is. That's all I got from this. This guy does not like his mother. But you posted a couple of them on your site, and I took a look this morning, and I was like, well, you know, might as well do a show on this, on what the future is going to be. I wish I could play the videos, but apparently Google does not like me, and if I play any video, they are flagging me and removing my videos now.
Okay.
They removed from Tech News Weekly a couple of weeks ago. I put a video up of their demonstration of the new Gmail.
Yeah.
And I said, credits go to Google and YouTube for this. And they took me off, and they took away my partnership account.
Wow.
Yeah.
There are sites that do nothing but repost videos. In fact, some of them put their own watermarks on them. I mean,
I know.
You know, you're doing it as part of a news feed, which is a perfectly valid form of.
My issue was that I wasn't appealing these because they give you an opportunity to appeal and say I'm using it under free free use. Free.
I wonder if you have a stalker who's just doing this to you.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of my videos have been downvoted lately too. One of my videos has
any
like
Mac.com email addresses,
yeah,
anything like that.
Yeah, Brian at apple.com has been downvoting everything. So
applefan@me.com.
I actually appealed it, and they gave me back my account.
Yeah.
So we're slowly updating all the accounts, but I wanted to play some of these, and I can't, and I fear getting taken down. But if you want to see the videos, you can go to winsupersite.com. I believe the blog is more Microsoft concept videos. It's just so fascinating to see. You know, 1999 was not a long time ago. And
it feels like it was, but yeah.
It's so Microsoft in the late 90s when you look at this.
Yep.
And, you know, many of the features are there. A lot of them are, you know, voice search, which we're going to get to, and video conferencing. That's pretty much all it is.
These videos all need to be looked at in the kind of the reference of the time. You know, Microsoft in late 1999 was still seen as kind of a decent consumer brand. You know, so it was like something the whole family was going to use. You know, Microsoft had moved from a computer on every desk to a computer in everyone's room. You know, that everyone would have their own computer. Yeah, it's interesting. You know, they do a lot with the phone stuff and the styluses on tablets, and touchscreen is in there.
You know, one thing that I picked up in the beginning of the video where the girl, I guess, or the guy is turning on the computer.
Yeah,
it looks like Longhorn. Did you notice that?
Yep.
Which this is 99, so Longhorn.
Yeah, with the log-on screen.
Yeah, which it wasn't 2000. It wasn't until 2003 till we saw it. But I guess they were kind of working on it at that point.
They had a lot of stuff that Whistler and Longhorn and the early MSN stuff where I don't want to call it a design language. It's giving it a little too much credence, but their stuff absolutely had a certain look to it. You know,
very bubbly, and everything is blue and green.
It's funny how low res the screens look. You know, the girl has what looks like sort of an iMac, right? A big screen, you know, all in one computer, which really didn't kind of exist back then like that. And yet it looks like it's got a 1024 by 768 screen. Yeah. You know, it's really kind of low res.
Again, if you want to watch the video and you can mute it and watch it while we're talking, you could go to winsupersite.com and play the videos there. The device that little boy has, what the hell is that?
It looks like it's an early phone. It's like a pocket PC phone kind of thing.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's a weird. It looks like a walkie-talkie.
It's like a Star Trek communicator. But I think it's got like a kind of a cylindrical thing, like it's curved. You know what I mean? Like the front of it's not flat, but it's obviously like this cheap plastic looking thing. It's kind of it looks like a compact iPack. Remember those?
Yeah.
Pocket PC. It's got that kind of look to it.
I had one of those, and I had the Dell. I forgot what the Dell one was called. Axiom? Yeah, I had an Axiom. Yep. But it is fascinating. And, you know, we'll mock these things, but everything pretty much exists that's in this video from 1999.
Yeah.
And one major, huge part of this, and this is what's really going to change computing in the future, is the voice activation and the voice recognition kind of search function that all these computers from like the future, you know, I'm talking about 10 years ago, think we would have. And we are going to see that within the next year because Windows is going to implement the Kinect on their... Is it going to be on all OSs or is it going to be Windows 8 only?
I don't know yet. I think we're going to find out more about that at CES in January. But I would really imagine at least it's a feature Windows 8. You know, that would be the...
What do you think?
But it's there on the Xbox basically now, and there'll be more of it coming sometime this month. You know, where you can use the Kinect to command the Xbox to play music or to find a TV show or do a search. You know, it integrates with Bing. You know, so it's already there.
Yeah. Do you think? How do you think it's going to go? Because I know do you think this is going to be something that people? You don't think it's going to go that great, huh?
I think it's going to go fine, but I don't think it's going to be Microsoft. You know, one of the cynical things you could say about this video is that everything that everyone is doing in this video is occurring today, but it's occurring on Apple devices. Yeah. You know, and that is sort of the way the future, well, the present has gone, if you will. You know, Microsoft has a lot of smart people, and they've got the big vision ideas, and they I guess they're starting once again to do a little bit of a better job of showing how these things that they have now can evolve into better things in the future. But, you know, Apple's big gift is taking previously available technology and ideas
and making it,
making it really nice
and making it work
easy.
for most people.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Microsoft has there's some great things that other companies have done that you and I will use, but most people won't. And one thing that comes to mind is, you know, Media Center.
Yep.
The average person is not using this. And even when you go to Roku or any of them, you know, a lot of people have a difficult time. And I love the Roku, but many people have a difficult time using it because you still have to take that old remote and hit input 1 or input 2. And some people can't get over that. I think that's a major problem for people. And I think if Google TV...
and I know it is. It is for my wife. I mean, we just bought a TV that has a number of services that are integrated into the TV, like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and a few others. They're not; those things are not as full featured as they are if you access them on a Roku box or on an Xbox 360 or whatever. But you don't have to switch inputs.
Yeah.
Or switch remotes or find the right remote and do all that kind of herky-jerky stuff. And, you know, when I'm doing it, I'll go use the Apple TV or one of the other devices. But when my wife does it, she just uses the one remote that comes with the TV and everything just works. So, yeah, it's understandable.
You know, when we think of Kinect and what it does on the Xbox, we're picturing this Minority Report style way of doing things where I'm going left and I'm doing this thing on the screen.
Yep.
Obviously, it's not going to be that when it's implemented, but
no, that's another one of the videos. You know, they did a video about the future of Kinect, and I actually take great exception to what I see in that video because it's ludicrous. You know, one of the
the person playing the cello.
It's ridiculous. There's the notion that this thing will suddenly and inexplicably become accurate enough to do something like that is absolutely laughable. I mean, I don't like. There's no kind of non-crass way to say this, but this is a device that can't see black people.
Yeah.
This is a device that can't work unless you're at least 6 feet away from the screen, which means I can't use it in any room in my house. You know, it is so ludicrously primitive compared to what they're showing. You almost want to cry, you know. And it cracks me up because I get the vision thing, I think, as well as anybody. I can get choked up at the possibilities and all that stuff. But I look at something like that Kinect video and I think to myself, this is ludicrous and this is stupid. And this is patently untrue. This is not going to happen. And, you know, it's funny, like I see people commenting on my blog like, oh, you know, you're getting really cynical as you get older, Paul, you know, and it's like, no, what I'm saying is you're not going to air violin.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to, God help me if I'm ever in a doctor's office and they want to use Kinect to do like surgery on me.
I saw that and I'm thinking,
no.
But you know what was funny?
Ridiculous.
They're not even calling it something else. You know, they're saying this is Kinect and this is what it's going to do. So pretty much they're implying that this toy that's on your, you know, Xbox will be performing accurate operations on you in the near future.
It's not. I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry. That's not true. Now, 12 years from now, right? If we go from 1999 to today, let's go forward another 12 years. Will there be some future version of the Kinect technologies that is more accurate, that works in a smaller room, that, you know, does all these other things? Absolutely. Does that mean that people are going to be, I still don't see air instruments, nor do I believe that that would be a rather a valid way of playing an instrument, because it's bad enough when you're smacking keys on an Xbox controller or using one of those silly guitars for like Rock Band, but doing complex finger movements in the air in no way gives you the feedback that you need to play such an instrument. It's ludicrous. It's just ludicrous.
You know, we like the idea that you can, you know, swipe stuff in the air and do computing like that, but in reality, I don't think anybody's really going to use it for that. I think it's great for the TV. I think the future...
so have you used the Kinect?
I have, yeah. So
something as simple as getting the system to recognize that you want to do something. You know, you put your hand up.
Yeah.
And you're like, hello. Let me know when this gets tiring. You know, because it's like you're doing it and it's not recognizing you. And so you move over a little bit or you move back, and then finally it does. And then you're moving your hand over to move the cursor, and it's like sort of moving, but then it stops moving. So you put your hand back and you do it again. And then after a while, you're like, yeah, screw this. This is stupid. You know, and this is me. I don't live in a McMansion, so I live in a normal sized house, and my TV is where it is. Like, there's not much you can do about it. And there's nothing I can do to make this better. It's just not going to work. So, you know, I get little kids coming in. Some of them work. It works with them fine. Some of them it doesn't. It always thinks one of the kids is one of the other kids. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't work for the silly little things it's supposed to do now.
Do you think it's a hardware flaw, or do you think it's software?
I think it's probably a combination. I mean, I think the software, even with the current hardware, could get more sophisticated and probably will. I just think it's. I don't know how to explain it. You know, it's like when you look at something like the iPhone 4S, which has that Siri voice control thing. You know, it's not hard to imagine controlling controlling a car, or controlling a home automation system, or a home stereo with your voice. It's not hard to imagine. When you use a Kinect, and then someone says, "Now I want you to imagine using this to perform surgery," that's silly. It's not. You can't imagine it. That's not going to happen. You know, it's just not going to happen. You know, I mean, it's funny. You know, even in the realm of just video games, Nintendo sort of pioneered this motion sensing thing, right? Yeah. And they did it with in a very unique way. You know, Nintendo's a quirky company, and that's what they do. But they have this certain kind of a controller, and then they have this other thing that's like a nunchuck, which is crazy. And you do things with it, you know. And then you have Sony, who came out with these their system is sort of like a baton, essentially. It looks like a lightsaber or something. But you can make an argument that, technically speaking, what Microsoft did is more sophisticated, because it doesn't require you to have a physical object in your hand. But on the other hand, when you're trying to emulate a real world activity, when you would be holding something like playing golf or whatever, it actually helps, I think, to have something in your hand.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think you're going to go from a real guitar to an air guitar and have it make any sense. Nor would you want to, even if it did.
See, that's the thing. I don't know who's going to want to record music that way. I mean,
will be absolutely someday an album recorded on Kinect, just because people are ridiculous like that. Like, someone will do that.
That's so silly.
But that doesn't mean that it's, you know, the harp is obsolete.
Yeah.
You know, it's not. That's not really how that works.
I think there's a lot of interesting things you could do with it in the future, but right now, who knows how ready it's going to be when it launches on Windows. And I don't know, you know, it seems like a great idea, and I know a lot of people want to see it on Windows, and eventually we all know it's going to be on Windows, but let's say this thing launches with Windows 8. And Windows 8 already, there are skeptics as to how good the operating system is going to be. This is going to be another minus for Windows 8. Already there are people that say, I'm never going to use this. This is going to be bad. It's not going to work right. And they've never used it.
I don't know. I don't see how it could work with Windows 8 beyond voice control. And of course, you don't need Kinect for voice control.
Well, the swipe thing, actually, if you go like this and you're swiping.
Well, no, but I don't like, for example, how far away is your face from your monitor right now?
Let's see. About not too far. I mean,
well, actually, that's pretty far. 3 feet? Yeah. 2 feet? Mine is probably about 15 inches or 18 inches, something like that. I'm pretty close.
Yeah.
You need 6 feet for that Kinect sensor to work.
You're gonna hold,
and you need to be standing up, by the way. So, you know, and obviously they can fix those things. What I'm saying is, right now, first gen Windows 8, I don't think you're going to be using a Kinect sensor on your PC sitting down at a desk or on a laptop. I just don't see it, unless there has been some major improvement and there's a Kinect 2 coming out that's for the PC and or whatever.
Built in maybe into the screen. You know, it's using a camera or something.
Sure. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying first gen. You know, right now, this year, I think Kinect makes sense in a living room, and even then, like I said, you need some space.
So you don't see, I guess, the next. Let's discuss, you know, the possibility for over the next decade where we are going to go, and again, this could all change, and we'll look back one day, and Paul will be an older man, and I'll be, you know, much older too, and I won't be on camera anymore. We'll look back and we're like, oh, this was really stupid. I can't believe we thought this.
Yeah.
Over the next decade.
Yeah, let's commit.
Let's commit to this. Well, it'll be in the archives. When the world is over next year, people will find this tape and say, boy, were they wrong.
And people are bitter enough to not only seek it out, but to keep tabs on it. Come back and do it,
Over the next 10 years, I mean, what is going to be the go-to technology? It's it's interesting how it evolved. Mobility has been obviously for in the 2000s. You know, that's what it was. It was mobility and how the cell phone evolved, and you know, the iPhone, and that's, I guess, that kind of changed everything. But
yep.
Where does this leave the desktop operating system? Where does this leave the traditional, you know,
I honestly, I think Windows 8 is a step in the right direction, because what it's doing is combining the historic strength of Windows, the versatility of Windows, its ability to work with a wide range of input types, keyboards, mice, you know, pens and styluses, touch, multi-touch, etc., Connect, you know, voice control, all this stuff. With all of that huge library of not just the software that's already available, but the programming libraries that are necessary to make those kind of sophisticated applications. You have all that stuff. You know, the Steve Jobs car versus truck thing is kind of interesting here, because the PC gives you the best of both worlds. You know, when you have something that's a very simple device, you're either constrained by the size of the device itself, like on a smartphone or a tablet, whereas, you know, I think these desktop computers, even though there probably will be less of them compared to mobile devices, will be more powerful devices and more appropriate for the, you know, content creation type stuff or whatever. You know, so I happen to be able to type very well, but I've always looked forward to that day where I could speak to my computer, which sounded like a good idea until I started talking all the time. Now I realize maybe it's not such a great idea, but I think, enjoy so much a voice control system, although that would have to be part of it, but rather a system that would understand what I was saying and treat my voice as, well, actually, I would want it to convert it to data. So it wouldn't be like handwriting on a tablet PC. It wouldn't just store it in that format. It would then convert it accurately into text. Now, obviously,
so you're thinking you would say, you know, search Google for
no.
Okay.
No, I have really specific needs because I'm a writer. What I would want to do is dictate a story,
okay,
right, and have it intelligently edit it, or have editing functionality, as I said. Now you can do that with Dragon naturally speaking, of course, but that's a kind of a niche.
And it has to learn over time. I mean, with the drag, I mean, I haven't used it in a couple of years, but I remember when I was using it, it would have to it would learn as you spoke, but it took some time to kind of understand it. Yeah.
I think that the people who will benefit most from a system like that are people that need it, not people that want it. And so my problem is I use it for a little while, and I do have the latest version, and I start talking, and it doesn't get a few things right, and I get frustrated, and I think I could just write this. You know, I can type. If you had some kind of a physical ailment or a disability or whatever, and that was the only way you could actually input massive amount of text into a computer easily, I bet you'd get pretty good at it.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that, but you are right. The voice recognition and voice enhanced, I guess, software, it will be probably the next big thing to come to these computers, because we've ditched touchscreen. I mean, honestly, I know it was
it's
fantasy,
a combination of these things, you know.
But I'm talking on like a laptop or like a desktop. I think we have abandoned the idea that we want to touch the screen that's in front of us, and I'm not talking about a tablet.
Depends on the screen. I mean, once you use a lot of touch screens, I mean, I find myself even reaching up to touch this desktop screen sometimes. You know, once you get used to a touch screen, it's hard to not touch. But on the other hand, if you're sitting in a movie theater or in your own house watching TV, you can't and don't want to touch the screen.
Exactly.
So there has to be other stuff. You know, it can't just be. It can't be a different thing everywhere. It needs to. You know, there should be combinations of things that make sense depending on the device you're interacting with at the time.
Yeah. So pretty much, if example, Siri eventually will be on, you know, the Mac OS.
Yeah.
And it should be. I mean, it should be integrated all around your, I guess, your environment that you're in.
But the problem I have with Siri, or there's a couple of problems I have with Siri. One is being out in the world. I don't like when people are talking to things, you know?
Yeah.
I am somewhat annoyed when someone has a Bluetooth headset on and they appear to be talking to the air. That's a little annoying. You don't see this as much as you used to, but one of the things I find very annoying are those people that use their cell phones as a walkie-talkie so you can hear the other guy talking to.
Yeah, the Nextels. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't stand that.
It was a huge trend here, Paul. Yeah, when I was in high school, everybody had a Nextel.
Terrible. So we've gone through this decade of people walking around like zombies with their white earbuds on, but at least we didn't have to be bothered with what they were doing. And then now we have for the past, like say, half decade almost, a similar generation of people who are like, walking around with their faces and their devices like this. They're just walking around. They're not paying attention. I sometimes will walk down the street and purposely not get out of the way when someone is walking with a phone like that, just because
what a jerk,
I
Paul.
would like to highlight for them how stupid what they're doing is. I let them bump into me, then I'm like, what? So
that's so funny.
Yeah, people are just, they're in their own little thing. So given how selfish people are and just the way people are, to them, they're always the most important person out in the world, whether they're driving or on their device or whatever it is. The notion of people sitting there dictating things to their phone is really kind of alarming. And it gets bad when you're just out in the world, like commuting. It gets a lot worse, I think, when you're in an office, especially these kind of open offices where everyone has a cubicle instead of their own office.
I was going to say, don't you think people are aware of their surroundings? But no, they're not.
No,
they're not aware.
They're absolutely not. So
I see myself, but you know what, Paul? I am horrible at creating reminders and setting up, notes for meetings. Yep. I had my wife's phone for a couple days. I set up all my meetings as soon as I would say, "Oh, Paul, let's talk next Monday." I would write, set up a reminder for next Monday to call Paul, and it was very easy for me to do that.
So, but let's see. I think the fundamental unsophistication of Siri is, not always, but most of the time, what you're doing is something that will generate some other thing on the computer. In other words, you're using your voice to trigger some other action that already exists on the phone, like creating a calendar entry or whatever. And most of the time, but not always, that means it does something on the screen, and then you have to look at it. So you talk, and it doesn't talk back to you. You don't have a conversation with it. You talk, it interprets, you listen to make sure it interpreted correctly, and then you look to make sure it interpreted correctly, and then you okay it or you move on or whatever. And so it's not, it's kind of a stilted pseudo conversation. You're giving it a command, but then you have to also interact with the screen. You're not walking around having a conversation. Siri, I would like to have an appointment with Paul. Okay, and then it will talk to and there are those examples where it talks back to you and you say, yes, okay, I still want to schedule that or whatever. Mm-hmm. But at the end of it all the time, you got to still be looking at the thing, make sure. And I think that the future of this, where this is headed, and by the way, I have to say, Siri is good enough that you can see this future, is that someone could be walking around their house, the phone never comes out of their pocket, maybe never comes out of the dock, whatever, it doesn't matter where it is, and you're just talking to it. And giving it commands, and it's responding intelligently, and it becomes that personal assistant. It's like a digital concierge or whatever, that kind of thing. And I think that's where it's going.
That is exactly where it's going. And I think it's going to be integrated in your house, and you're going to be able to make this huge push. I think Siri will be integrated in the next Apple TV or whatever type of device the next generation Apple TV is. We don't even know if it's a display. It could just be Apple TV with a microphone and picks up everything. But it's a first-gen device for Apple. The product's been out for over a year, but it is really it's really good for what it is.
It is good. Yeah, no, I've used voice command systems on Windows Mobile that date back almost 10 years. Windows Phone 7 actually has some decent voice command stuff. Android does as well. And I tend not to use these things because they're not super sophisticated, and more often than not, just doing it the normal way is fine.
Yeah.
And I think, like Apple, the gift that this company has is they can create something like this where you're like, okay, this could be in fact be useful. I guess I'm just fearful of how, unfortunately Apple's so popular, they could in fact trigger a change in the way that people interact with these devices, just like they did when they went to a purely touchscreen environment. And I think we need to think about that future, whether it makes sense and whether...
well, the iPad, I mean, you look at something like the iPad, and I was one of the first people, and I've been 0 for 2 with Apple devices. I thought the iPhone was not going to be a huge thing.
Right.
By the way, I was on a Palm Trio 650 at the time.
Sure.
And then I said, well, who's going to buy this iPad? Its tablets don't work.
Well,
and I was wrong in that sense, too.
I knew the iPhone was a big deal. The second I saw it, I knew it was huge. And I decided that time I was going to devote a lot of time to writing about it, which I did. The iPad I immediately dismissed because I have a long history with tablets and I understand how they work and what works and doesn't work and all
Yeah.
that stuff, or I thought I did. And the reason I dismissed it was because I saw it as sort of a bald grab on Apple's part, because Apple makes money from software. So what they do is I'm sorry, on hardware. And what they do is here's like yet another thing that people can get locked into our services on.
Yeah.
Another way to consume the same stuff you're already using on these other devices. And this seems sort of, it's like a giant iPod Touch.
But it's also a device that we do not need.
No
You
one
know,
needs
you
it,
don't
except
need
for one
that.
thing. Then you see it out in the world, and you see
Yeah.
normal people using it, and you realize, my definition of need is possibly inadequate here,
Yeah.
because while it's possible for my grandmother, let's say, to use a netbook or a regular personal computer, she's arguably better off with an iPad, and that is a need, actually.
I'll tell you, my
So,
grandmother that has never driven a car.
Yeah.
She barely could turn on the TV. She doesn't. She's very old school with that. She's in her late 70s. She uses the iPad every day, and I'm blown away by the fact that she can, and she types on the iPad. I tried to have her use a computer years ago, and she just looked at it like it's a creature from the deep sea. But the iPad, she kind of understood it. But I think it's because in a way, and I think it's their marketing, and I think it's the way that people present this to other people. They present it as this is the simplest thing you'll ever use.
Right.
And automatically people are conditioned to think, well, yeah, it is simple, and I'll learn.
Yep.
It's a 50-50 mix. I think a lot of it is that, you think it's easy, so you're using it. But I do feel that the other portion is you don't have this back-end stuff to deal with. And for many people, that's easy.
There's sort of I'm not sure if it's subtle or not subtle, but one of the big changes over the past 5, maybe 10 years, let's say 5 years, is that people, you kind of stuck with Windows PCs all along, and still do, for different reasons. They're familiar with them. They like the software compatibility. But, the way the world's going, there are no major new apps on Windows anymore. And that the pull of backwards compatibility isn't as great as it used to be. And I think one of it's not fair to call it an advantage of Windows, really, but I think one of the things you got with Windows was this notion of compatibility. It's going to work with the stuff that you use.
Well, and
now
eventually
the stuff that we use is a little different.
Well, eventually they're going to leave that. I mean, you're seeing the transition with Windows 8, and that's why people are getting upset.
Yeah,
you still have support.
And those people, like power user types.
Yeah.
It's important for me to I have to kind of beat this one to death. In fact, the reason I'm going to Vegas, I'm going to host a panel that is about this very topic. They need to understand they do not represent not just the majority, but the mainstream. And that Microsoft needs to act decisively now, because if they don't, this market, which is very important to the company, could just dry up. And Windows 8 is their response to that. And it does gives you that best of both worlds thing, where it will run those apps that you still care about if you do. But I really do believe that there's a coming generation of people who doesn't care about those apps, does not care about Microsoft Office or Adobe Photoshop or whatever at all. They care about Gmail. They care about whatever messaging app or whatever they use to instant message their friends. They care about Facebook.
Yeah.
And no offense, but that stuff works great on phones and tablets, Macs, everything. And a lot of times those people are not going to choose PCs. So you need to give them a reason to want to use the PC.
Well, I think Windows 8 is a great reason. I think Windows 8 will... I don't know. It's not a saving of the company, but I think it's showing you the direction of where they're going, and I think you know where it's going to save the company? In the tablet market. I think the current operating system as we know it is not intended for a tablet. It doesn't look nice on a tablet. It's just you're touching Windows. But I think Windows 8 will. And
I don't think it's an exaggeration to use the term saving Microsoft.
Okay.
Because I think that Windows is core to everything they do. And like I said, I have kids, so I can look at kids. I know teenagers, and I know what they do and what they use and the computing things that they care about. These people all love Apple devices. They like online services. They don't care. They don't know about installing stuff or care. They don't want to do that stuff. They don't really care. It's not interesting to them. And You know, these people go to college and they go out into the workforce and they expect, as we did before them, to have access to the tools that they're familiar with. And those tools are not necessarily Windows and Office anymore. This is a big problem for Microsoft. So, you know, one of the things I've been arguing for a while now is I don't understand why Microsoft doesn't put Office on iOS and on Android. You know, that this sort of harkens back to their roots. You know, before they were the only OS maker out there, you know, they used to provide these applications or programming languages for a variety of platforms. I feel very strongly that they should still be doing that, you know, even as they forge ahead with Windows 8 or whatever. But yeah, Windows 8 is a big deal because if you lose this generation, it's over.
It's over, yeah. Yeah, you have to think about the next decade. You have to think, and that's why.
Well, because they're going to go into, you know, they're going to be making the decisions someday. These people who did not grow up on Windows and don't care about Windows, so they're going to go into the workforce. And these guys, the old timers, are going to say, "Yeah, we got these Windows servers here that have Exchange on them," and they're going to be like, "What?"
I mean, there's a whole
go to Gmail.
There's going to be a whole generation of people out there in the next 15, 20 years that have no idea what Control-Alt-Delete is.
Right, God bless them.
You know, I mean, we were discussing the bad habits.
People, you know, just like there used to be a whole generation of people that knew how to fix a car because that was the prerequisite for owning a vehicle. And then eventually they became sophisticated enough that we didn't have to worry about that, and that's when they went mainstream. You know, computers are kind of, you know, these kind of out-of-date skills that we have are not applicable to the wider world and shouldn't be, arguably, right?
So you think this is the direction that Microsoft is headed, this type of UI in the coming years? Or do you feel that they're going to stick to this and be dedicated to this, well, I guess, Metro-style UI where it's, you know, everything is tiled up?
I mean, I can't see that far ahead. In the same way that you look at a video from 1999 and you recognize these kind of common elements and say, oh, this dates it to this age, you know, it's possibly true that this Metro stuff will date Microsoft to the 2010 to 2015 era or whatever. I think that Microsoft is right to create a single user experience that works across all of these devices and screens, and it's smart, you know. I think that deeply integrating these things with back-end services, not just their own, but third-party services that people care about, like Facebook, is smart. I think that Windows 8 is good enough that people are going to see it in a store, normal people, and compare it to the iPad, which, by the way, you know, is going to change too, so we can't just sit still on this, but it will compare favorably, and people will say, I want that. And when they realize they can get this on their TV, maybe through an Xbox or whatever in the future, or on a phone as well, that they're going to want that too. And I think the big difference from a Microsoft perspective is that this future will be a bigger market of customers, so they can still grow, but they're not going to be the company that has 90% of everything like they were in the PC.
Well, that's that 90%. Yeah, that 90% market share is we're going to start seeing it drop over the next, you know, 3 or 4 years. That's going to fall.
It will drop until it's no longer relevant. You know, I mean, in the sense that, you know, 10 years from now, I don't know how we're going to differentiate these things, but the computing devices will need to encompass smartphones and tablets and what we now think of as PCs, but also these sort of like, you know, Xbox 360 type consoles that you have in your living room, or maybe these whole house walls that are interactive and do all this kind of thing.
Television sets. I mean, they're all going to be running something.
All this stuff. So in such a world, a traditional PC represents the minority. Yeah. You know, so Windows market share on a traditional PC for the past 20 years was a very big deal. For the next 20 years, market share is not such a big deal, because that's not the majority computing platform anymore.
Do you feel that they were successful because it was easy to use and it looked good compared? I mean, if you ask me, anything prior to OS X was junk for me, sure. and I'll say that. I think, and to be honest, I think anything before Tiger was not that great. I think, in my opinion, Apple really got it going in the right direction after Tiger. And I feel that the OS is, and I know how you feel about it. I know you don't like the UI. You don't feel that it's this elegant, beautiful UI that people claim it to be. And I know a lot of people, you know, they're going to be upset by that. But I mean, even Apple didn't think it was going good with their previous OSs. That's why they ditched that entire platform.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's hard to put yourself back in the mindset of 1993 or 1999 or whatever year, because we didn't have what we have now, and it's just hard to even imagine.
Yeah, and I'm only going back to the 90s. I'm not. I know. Pre Windows 95, it wasn't that nice, but when Windows 95 came out, that kind of changed everything.
Well, Windows 95 to me was a big deal because the world went the way it went, right? Microsoft was dominant. I didn't feel that Windows was worth anything. I hated it. So when I saw Windows 95, I thought, okay, this one's good enough. They finally are rolling in these ideas that were previously existed.
Yeah,
on the
you used an
Macintosh
Amiga, right? You were an Amiga guy.
Yeah.
By the way, the new ones are coming out.
Well, yeah, sort of. So, I wish I lived in a world where the new Amigas were. Yeah, but not the case. No, I mean, I just I just can't put myself back in that mindset. But I mean, in 1995, I was very excited about Windows 95. I remember being excited about the reason my website exists is because I was excited by the notion that Microsoft was going to combine their consumer and business products, meaning their NT and their DOS kernels, into a single product, and kind of give consumers the reliability and the durability of NT, and then give the NT folks, all of the good stuff from compatibility wise that you got as a consumer. So to me, that was very exciting. Now looking back on that now, it was a huge transition. To me, it's like, like whatever. That doesn't sound exciting to me in the slightest. I know because I did it that's why I started my website. But looking at it now, it's like that's not a particularly compelling reason to start a website that you're still running like 12 years later or whatever.
Well, I think a lot has changed. I mean, you look at what Linux is doing. Ubuntu looks beautiful. The next I think 12.04 is going to be the next release. The thing is
it's like so what.
Yeah, I mean, but it's a beautiful OS. It's stunning, and they're saying it's going to be on the mobile platform. So it does that. The look doesn't really matter as much anymore. I don't know what
maybe the compatibility doesn't matter, although it doesn't seem to have helped Linux. You could do what almost anyone wants to do today online in Linux. No one is doing that.
I think the reason for that, Paul, is the fact that it was so difficult to use for the average person for many, many years. Only in the last couple of years, it got
too late.
Yeah.
Windows is the volume player. If you want something that you perceive to has more value and is slightly more expensive and has that aesthetic, that whatever you have Macs, and I don't really see there being a need for anything else. I mean, on the smartphone front, we also have two players, right? But they're not. Microsoft's not one of those two players right now. So. You also have the Android, which is very much like the PC, in that it's a mess and it's all over the place, and everyone makes one, and they're all slightly different. And then you have this elegant, beautiful system, also, again, made by Apple in the form of the iPhone. So, whether that market plays out exactly like the PC market did, and Android just kind of runs away with it and is the volume player, and the iPhone is still a viable market, but nowhere near as big. Who could say? I don't see why it has to be exactly the same, but.
Over the next couple of years, I believe Android is going to get a little more closed than it is. They're going to have to survive. They're going to have some sort of guideline for manufacturers to follow. Yeah,
I believe that too. But things have gone in such a way already that I can't say that I foresaw any of this stuff. I mean, when Google came out with Android, and I mean the Google version of Android, not the initial vision of Android, but the actual iPhone-like smartphone, with touchscreen and everything. I didn't think much of it, Something based on Linux that uses Java as the programming language did not seem like it could possibly be a potential threat to anything.
And now it has market share. I mean, it has dominance.
My wife has one. It's crazy.
I'm imagining they're gonna have to kind of reel it in, and we have seen it already. They're not releasing the source code for their latest versions.
Yeah.
So we're kind of seeing that they're saying, well, no, play around with the old stuff. We'll release this later. I think 3.0 was just released, or 3.1 was just released, and they're going to 4. And who knows how long it's going to take for you to get the source code for that if you're a manufacturer. Over the next couple of years, they're going to have to do this.
I guess we'll see. I mean, I almost I could picture sort of a stage release where everyone has unfettered access to V-1,
Yeah.
and Google reserves the right to just sort of work on the current version solely and for some set amount of time or something. But yeah, I mean, eventually you're going to have to get some pushback, and then this whole sort of fragile economy may come teetering down. I don't know. It's amazing to me that they've done what they've done.
But again, who thought
already.
in the year 2000 that one of the best phones on the market would be made by Apple?
The greatest irony of our business is go back in time and tell someone, hey, by the way, 10 years from now, the primary computing platforms of the future are going to be based on Mac OS 10 and Linux.
Yeah.
And people would just laugh at you. And, if they knew what you were talking about, you would get laughed at. And if they didn't, that what you just said would mean nothing to them. They would be very confused.
Yeah, it's a totally different world. And I think technology changed rapidly from from 2005 to 2010. We did this thing a couple of years ago where we went back to, and I don't know, were you on it? We were talking about decades and how technology changed over the decades, from the 80s to the 90s, from 92 to 2000s.
Okay.
From the 2000s to 2010. I think it was last year when we hit 2010 we did this. And it's a fascinating thing because there was a rapid, for mobile technology, mobility rapidly grew in 5 years.
Right.
And it was so fast. I mean, from the iPhone and then to Android, it totally changed. I mean, cell phones changed overnight almost.
Yeah, I mean, in the same way, I have these two periods of time where I know I did a lot of stuff, but I can't remember what it was. And one was on personal computers, which would have been Amigas in the early 1990s. Spent hours and hours and hours every day. I would stay late at night and get up in the morning to go to work and would be really groggy. And I would have been doing stuff on this computer all night. I have no idea what I was doing on that computer because it was not connected to the internet. You had like a modem you could get onto like BBSs and stuff, but there wasn't a lot you could do. And being pervasively connected all the time now, I have a hard time, wondering what the heck I was doing back then. And then mobile devices are the same way. I have probably owned somewhere around 20 what I would call disconnected mobile devices, meaning PDAs, Palms, Windows Mobile, Pocket PC devices. In the days before pervasive 3G connectivity or whatever, I still had all these devices. And back then you would sync it to your computer, I guess. It was mostly about,
getting the data
contacts
off,
and calendar and whatever.
Yeah, the Palm PDA, that's all you pretty much use it for. You could go online.
I don't remember what the heck, why did I have these things? It seemed important at the time, I think I had almost every Palm device ever made. I had several handspring devices. I had one of those Rex things. I had numerous Pocket PC / Palm size PCs / Windows CE devices, whatever those things were. Lots and lots, probably more than 20, all said and done. Some of them had high-res screens, and eventually they were color, and eventually those compact things had the sleeves, and you could put like a Wi-Fi card in it, or it would kill the battery, and
they were awful devices. I mean, if you look at it, but for the time
today they would be laughable.
For the time, they were it was a computer in your hand, and you were running around with a computer. Look, I can play.
Maybe that was it. It was just almost the novelty of it,
I have a family friend that still uses his old Palm Pilot. The one that was made by Handspring. I forgot what the model was.
Yeah,
the old one. It's fascinating how he still uses.
Remember, it was metal. It had like a metal flip cover.
Yeah,
they're really high quality devices, as I recall.
Well, if you look at it, that's where we are. And I wonder in 10 years we're gonna look back at the iPad and be like, wow, look at this stupid thing. I can't believe you ran around with this. Thought it was a great device. Well,
I mean, the iPad is amazing on the one hand, but I think what's going to kill the iPad is the next iPad. In other words, is this version of the iPad that has a super high-res screen where it will do for the iPad what the Retina display did for the iPhone 4, which is you don't really change the size of it, but all of a sudden the richness of what you can display there is dramatically better. That's going to make a big difference. It's kind of like that low-res screen we were talking about in the video.
I think what's going to really compete in the tablet market is not a tablet, but it is a laptop that becomes a tablet. The screen pops off and you dock it back on.
You know, the original tablet PC, by the way, you know, the Microsoft one, as originally envisioned, that was going to be a slate device. That was the point of it. And some of the hardware makers came out with these things you could kind of clip on a keyboard, like there was a compact device that actually was sold as an HP that was like that. But it was one of their hardware makers, I want to say it was Acer, but I'm not actually positive, that came out with an idea called a convertible tablet. It was a laptop where the screen could swivel around. You could slap it down and use it as a slate or use it as an actual laptop. And that type of device, not that the tablet PC ever sold in volume, but the majority of those devices were the convertible laptop because it was so, you know, usable or whatever. And
I know so many people that still have that. They use it all the time. My doctor's office uses it.
Yeah. So I think that's the future, right? That it will be a computer that looks like a MacBook Air, where the guts of the computer are actually behind the screen. It's still super thin and light, and you can take off. You can either unhinge, you know, just remove the keyboard, or you can flip the thing around and it clips back on. I do think that is the future of mobile PC computing, if you will.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Apple is interesting because they seem to, since we're having this one unified operating system that Microsoft is going to be doing, you know, the tablet and the phone. Eventually, I mean, we don't know yet, but the phone will eventually take shape, and we'll see if it's going to become this one device. But where does this leave Apple? Do you think Apple's going to ditch their operating system in the next coming versions and say, okay, everything is going to be iOS-like?
Yeah.
It's far more difficult for Apple to do this than for Microsoft, because Microsoft pretty much is saying,
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Well, this is the reason why I think that.
Yeah.
When you look at Windows 8, it's still Windows. So you're taking the fundamental operating system that you've had for years, and you're putting it on these other devices, and it's going to work well on those devices.
Right.
You're going backwards with iOS on an iOS type device on your MacBook Pro. Mm-hmm. I think the functions are going to be. I don't know if there's going to be a clash or people are going to embrace it, but in my opinion, I don't think it's going to be easier for them to do it. Now, you tell me why I'm so wrong.
Well, Apple has experience doing this kind of thing before. They've switched platforms twice in major ways. They went from OS 9 to OS 10, which was a huge shift, and they did that very quickly and successfully. And then they went from the PowerPC platform to Intel, which is a huge, huge deal, and without really disrupting users in any major way, which is somewhat astonishing. On the Mac, as on the PC, the people who represent the high end of the market that need to use Photoshop and all those creative apps and so forth represent a tiny, tiny minority. You know, there were rumors this very week that Apple is considering getting rid of their Power Mac line. Because, you know, they must not sell many of those things, aside from the fact that they're very expensive. There's just a tiny market of people that needs that kind of thing.
It's very small, yeah.
I could picture that stuff going into kind of a maintenance mode, much like the iPod Classic has, where there's this tiny but dedicated minority that needs that thing. So we'll sell you that thing, but really all of our emphasis is on this other thing over here. And, you know, Apple has succeeded, I think, beyond the wildest dreams of the craziest Apple advocate. But of course, once Apple does that, it's no longer your company anymore, right? Yeah. I mean, those very guys who were like stuck by Apple to the bitter end and are so excited by how everything turned out, I think they need to understand that Apple doesn't really care about or need those people.
Yeah, because it reinvents itself every couple of years.
And reinvents themselves as a mainstream consumer electronics company that serves the people, just regular people, not the 25 million crazy people, the 500 million regular people. You know, it's a much bigger market. So, I mean, without just, it would be silly to sort of guess how they could do it, but I could picture a machine that dual booted, or a machine where iOS ran as a subsystem of OS 10. Where there were low-end machines that only had that subsystem, where, you know, you could kind of see them going toward this in the same way that OS 10 was a way for them to start over for a decade of computing. You know, iOS could also be a way for them to start over for this new generation of computing and meet the needs of this coming decade, not the needs of the previous decade. Like you said, it's about mobility and smaller screens and that kind of thing. So, I think we'll always have, 27-inch iMacs and all that kind of stuff. But
the interesting thing, Paul, I mean, currently, if I'm on an OS X, I'm using a Mac, and I use Windows, it's fairly the same thing. I mean, it's still, you have your desktop, and then you have your icons, even though you have that little bar, but it's still...
Well, but given that no one is creating apps for the Mac, by the way, either. It's not like Windows is unique in this way. I mean,
no, but
no one is creating major new Mac apps. No one is creating major new Windows apps. Why not just make it? Why not just make it iOS? I mean, think about it. You could all of a sudden, every app developer in the world who makes stuff for your system could now change it just a little bit so it works with a keyboard and a regular pointing device, and brand new, humongous market for you. Game makers would embrace this thing. It would be bigger than Windows.
Well, that's what they're trying to do right now with their Mac store, right? With their software store.
But you can tell that's not taking off.
It's not.
The way you can tell is they never, ever even mention it.
Yeah.
Apple loves to talk about stuff that's successful, and one of the things they never talk about is the Mac App Store. I talked to those developers, the guys who do developer training down in Atlanta, the big Nerd Ranch guys. Mm-hmm. They got their start doing Cocoa, Mac OS 10, well, next up for that development. And they told me point blank, no one is coming in there to take Mac OS 10 programming classes. It's all about iOS. It's about Android. It's about web. There is no interest in the Mac.
I wonder why it didn't pick up. I mean, I've purchased things off of there, but I think I bought Aperture.
Well.
I bought Aperture when it was on discount, and I bought Line on there, and I know they were, saying, "Oh, look, millions of people downloaded."
Because it's yesterday. It's still yesterday.
Yeah.
Just like Windows, Microsoft is remaking Windows for this new decade of computing. They're doing it their way. Apple did the same thing. I mean, iOS is based on Mac OS 10. It's really, let's rethink this OS for a smaller device.
Yeah.
And there's no reason it can't encompass, the majority of what's important about OS 10 and drop the stuff that isn't important.
But here's the problem I see going into the future. Let's say, and again, this is all hypothetical. We're going based on what's current right now. Let's say Apple goes in this direction where it's this iOS type environment, and this is pretty much the fundamentals of their desktop OS. It's iOS, in the state that we understand it to be. And Windows is going into this tile Metro UI. You have separated these into two radically different operating systems. That cross between, I might jump over to Windows, I might jump over to Mac, and it's going to be easy for me to learn. It's going to be different. I think there's going to be a huge division like there was for many years, because and I'm not saying me or you, but some people, the average user, will not understand.
Let's take my complete and utter guess from earlier and pretend it happens for real. If Apple comes out with a MacBook Air in 2012 that runs both iOS and Mac OS 10 apps, they have done what Microsoft is doing right now with Windows 8. They've created a system that runs all the stuff from the past and, via this new environment, all of the stuff from the present or the future. That's what the Metro stuff, the WinRT runtime, that's what it is. It's a new thing. They're not getting rid of the old stuff, which is what Apple did for the iPhone originally, which was the right approach, I think, by the way, for that device. Mm-hmm. But Microsoft is trying to bring general purpose computing ahead, as well as provide developers with a system that is similar to an iPad or an iPhone or whatever as well. So, Microsoft and Apple do things differently, but the end result may be very similar. In the same way that the NT-based Windows XP was in many ways a lot like Apple switching to a Unix-based OS 10.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Paul, we got to wrap it up.
About it differently.
We got to wrap it up. An hour went by. You got to get on your flight.
No idea what's going to happen. I think it's the important thing to remember here.
You got to go on your flight. I can't believe
I do know I have to do that.
This is it's a very interesting conversation. I encourage everybody, send us an email. Let us know what you think. If you send it to guysfromqueens@gmail.com, we'll I'll definitely get back to you. I think it's a very fascinating thing on where it's headed and where it's going to be headed. It's mind-blowing right now what both companies are doing, and I could have never imagined that we would be in this app environment, 10 years ago, where everything is little dots on your screen. Just click on things. Very interesting stuff. Paul, I appreciate, once again, you joining me here on What the Tech. I thank you like you're never coming back.
I know.
It's that fear. That fear I have. This is it. This is always the last week. Check out Paul's site, winsupersite.com. A lot of our stuff is from WinSuperSite, so you could read along and follow along on what we're talking about over there. Remember, also, you can subscribe to us. We're on almost every device. We're on iTunes. We're on the Zune. I encourage everybody that has a Zune to subscribe to us. I think we were the #2 most subscribed show last week on the Zune. So you could go get all the information at gfqnetwork.com. And we'll see you all next week on What the Tech. Good night, everybody.